Greetings, I'm Doc V. I was at the grocery store tonight to pick up a few things after work, and then I had to go by the church. We had a meeting over there and had to take care of some things. But anyway, when I went to the store, I was going through the line, I had a few items, and I looked up, and right at the top shelf, there was one of the major magazines, one of the major publications, and it had a picture of Jesus. They had him as a white male with long brown hair. And right when I looked at it, I felt a little bit of an offense because from my studies, I happen to know that or believe, well, in my heart, I know without a doubt. But of course, I wasn't there, so I can't prove it. But in my knower, in my deep knowing, Jesus was not a white male. And I kind of shook it off while I was going through the line. And I turned and looked, and there was another publication, and they had another picture of Jesus, and they had him as a white male, but this time he had blonde hair and blue eyes. They were talking about Jesus, the man that prophesied and the man that... And again, I couldn't receive the message because I was still stuck on why do they not have Jesus as he really appeared? What is going on with this battle with the black race in a white society where everything good, everything powerful, everything noteworthy has to be a particular race? I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to keep this where it's not going to offend anyone. I have a friend. I can call him a friend because we grew up in the streets together racing, and he's white. We used to race in the streets when we were young teenagers. He's fast. He went on to college, had records, was a superstar in his college, and I was a star at my college, and then we met again and shared pictures and memories and everything, and we talked. And because of our background, we can talk about things that most blacks and whites can't get together and talk about, or we'll get in an argument about it, and it could end up with an offense or someone getting angry or maybe a fight. But because of our history, we can bounce off of each other, get a little frustrated, get a little angry, then back off, and then come back and not take it personal. I remember one time when he would tell me that there's more blacks in jail and more blacks that are not professional and their families are broken up, and they're just a problem. And you look at the crime rate, and I had to stop. I said, stop. And I shared with him about how when slavery ended, the slavery was terrible. I shared with him some things that he hadn't heard of, like slaves being a metal muzzle put around their face so they wouldn't eat the crops that they were picking. Or the term whistle while you work. While they were working in the kitchen, they were forced to keep whistling because if they stopped whistling, then the slave owner would think that they were eating the food and go in there and punish them. Pregnant women were punished. They dug a hole in the ground and laid the woman on top of the hole where her stomach could fit in, and they would beat her back with the whip, but they didn't want to hurt the baby because the baby was property. I told him some of these things, and he just was shocked. He didn't know. And I talked about how after slavery was ended, after the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, but Texas didn't get the message till 1865. After this, blacks were freed, but they weren't given anything. They didn't have any property. They were not given any money, no jobs. They were just thrown out there. But the slave owners, the people that owned the slaves, the government compensated them. They received reparations, the slave owners, but the slaves themselves did not. So I asked him, I said, how do you expect the black man to be at the same level as the white man in society, or the Asian, or the European, or the Chinaman? How can you expect them to be at the same level when they started off so low with Jim Crow laws that forbade blacks to be out of work or to be vagrants or to be hanging out in the streets? They were arrested for the simplest offenses or non-offenses. You're making too much noise. I think I saw you looking at my wife. They would lock them up and put them right back in the cotton fields, put them right back in the camps where the slaves were and work them to death. They were freed men. So blacks lived lives where they were unable to get treatment from the doctor's office. They had to go to grandmama's house where she had herbs and different things, and turmeric and oils and honey and things that she would use to calm sickness because they couldn't go to the doctor. They got hurt. If the police came and there was a situation and there was blacks and whites, automatically it must have been the blacks' fault, and they beat them down or threatened them or called them boy and just demonized them and minimized them. He didn't know about this. I said, how do you expect the black man to come from that and to excel to the same level. Even our finances or our economic power. Most people in the wider WIDER society have generational wealth passed down to them. The black man didn't start off with generational wealth. There's some things that are passed on now, but back in slavery time, or when slavery was ended, there was nothing passed down to us. We had to work where we could work and accept the pay that we were paid and try to stay away from the hammer of the law so we wouldn't end up dead or end up in jail. So he quieted down as we had this conversation, and he went and researched, and then every time he researched, he'd come back to me. For example, I told him, or we talked about the ancient Egyptian sculptures, or megalithic sculptures, life-size sculptures, and the small sculptures, when they were discovered, had the noses broken off. And I've mentioned this before in an earlier publication. And I said it was to hide the black identity of the great pharaohs and kings and African kings that lived. Or let me say this, when I was growing up, I was taught that blacks were running around half naked in the jungles, and slavery was the best thing that could have happened to them. They were captured and brought over, and they worked, and it was better for them than where they came from. That's the way I was taught growing up. I found out later that blacks were descendants of the Egyptians. Blacks were descendants of some of the main characters in the Old Testament of the Bible. Blacks were Nubian kings from Africa. And somehow they were dispersed because of, some people say it's plague, some people say curses. But anyway, somehow blacks were deemed as half a human or partially human, and they were captured and brought over and treated like property, like cattle. He argued with me a little bit, and I went back at him with some more information, like, for example, blacks were not permitted to own property. Jim Crow wouldn't let blacks live in certain places, redlining, offenses, drug possession, vagrancy, crossing the street the wrong way, getting loud, arrested for anything, and locked up. Things changed, and blacks began to unify and grow and build, and there's several examples. Black Wall Street, 1921. The black community was flourishing, great, and it was deemed as a threat, so it was destroyed, firebombed. They tried to rebuild years later, decades later, and then the government put a highway through to keep them down, because there had to be a maintenance of superiority, where whites were superior and black and brown people were a subculture. Anytime that looked like it was going to be threatened, then the tanks and the guns would come in to diminish that. Some of the great cities and communities that were deemed a threat were destroyed, were flooded over, and water resort was built over it, or a highway was ran through it to maintain this balance or imbalance. It's called systemic racism, and it is real, and it is true. There's laws in the books that are designed to protect, and things are better. Things have improved. Things are not where they used to be. You can't lynch a black man and hang him in a tree and not go to jail for it. Of course, if you don't get caught, that might be an issue, but with forensics and technology, you will be found out. Plus bribery and money, you'll be found out. So things are different, but some of the hearts of people are still the same. Some of the people that are responsible or have the power to hire you or promote you have these feelings like, I don't know if I want to promote this man because he's qualified, he's good, but I don't know, we might have too many black people or too many dark-skinned people or off the main path looking people, if I can say it that way, in our front office, and that might mess up our brand. I had an associate that was making multiple six figures with a big law firm, and they had a big meeting with all the partners, and he was the only black one in the meeting, but he happened to come in late, and he sat in the back, and he was sitting behind a big beam where the speaker and announcer couldn't see him. And the announcer was saying, our company's grown by leaps and bounds. We're doing excellent. It's a great opportunity here, but we have a problem. We have too many black faces in the front or on the front lines, and that might ruin our brand, so we need to do something about that. And they didn't see him back there. Now, the whites that were back there saw it. They were kind of getting uncomfortable, but the speaker didn't see it. And the gentleman went to the other employees, and it came to me through the grapevine. You need to watch yourself. You need to come to work on time. You need to do what you need to do. You need to keep your numbers up because some of us are going to be cut, not because you're not capable, not because you're not skilled, not because you're not educated properly, but because you represent a threat. I say this, black man, be strong. Don't make babies that you don't want to take care of. Don't develop a drug habit, and do not get a felony record, because these things will hold you back and keep you down, along with the other things that are on your shoulders. There's laws that are put in place to protect us and to give us a chance for the American dream. But the people that make these laws, some of them that are in control of the implementation or the facilitation of these laws, still have the old mindset of, I'm better than you because of my lineage or who I am. And sometimes if you get too strong and too cocky or are deemed as a threat, you can be cut down. There is an incident I'm going to share with you back in 1959, where a gentleman bought a black man bought a brand new Chevy Malibu. Now, that's happened when my dad was a kid back then. And in 1959, a man worked hard at an assembly plant, worked hard, saved his money, and he bought a brand new 1959 Chevy Malibu. Put a suit on, and he was walking around, and he was feeling good about himself, went to the mall, had a little bit of money, just walking around, standing around white folks, and taking care of his business, being polite, saying, hey, how y'all doing? And they didn't like that. They arrested him for something, I don't know, disruption, jaywalking, or dropped some paper on the floor, whatever. They figured out a way to arrest this man, a young black man in his late 20s, early 30s, bought a brand new Chevy Malibu in 1959. And they arrested him, took him to the jail, took clubs, and they beat him to death. They covered it up, pushed it under the rug, said he did something, he tried to fight him. I don't know what happened to his car, but he was history. Now, things have changed. Y'all are familiar with the Ahmaud Arbery case when the black man was jogging through the neighborhood and he was accosted by 3 people that said he didn't look like he should be here, and they ran him down with a shotgun and killed him dead. And the 3 men responsible, they're in jail right now for that. That would have happened 50 years ago or 30 years ago without cell phones, they probably would have walked. So what am I saying in summary? We don't have to live in fear. We don't have to live without hope, but we need to realize that we have to walk carefully, and we have to realize and know who we are. And there's going to be some doors that are going to close to us, and there's going to be some that are going to open. Blacks represent 85% of professional sports, especially football and basketball. Why? Because they love us? They think that we're cool? No, it's because winning is money. And in professional sports, having some African Americans or black men on your team is going to better your chances. I'm not trying to be racist. I'm just giving the facts. But when this power and energy is not directed the way they want it directed and becomes a threat, like you discovering a patent for something or inventing something or finding a way to influence people or to make money, you're being watched. Bill Cosby being watched. Arsenio Hall being watched. Oprah Winfrey being watched. Michael Jordan being watched. Our great leaders, our great musicians and artists and people that have strong influence are being watched. And when this influence is deemed a threat, it can be cut down. So we must walk in wisdom and in victory, and we must walk in the faith in God, in the Word of God. Yes, the Word of God it's been messed with also. I just have to be honest. The new versions of the Bible, they take certain things out that are definite and succinct when it talks about the races of people back in the Old Testament. But anyway, I don't want to get too far into that. In summary, The Black Man's Mountain. It's a book that I've written, and it's available on Amazon.com. And it talks about black men that want to be educated, that want jobs, that want opportunities, that fight hard to try to excel and try to be something. But the barriers that face black men are different than the barriers that face other cultures. Some of you don't want to believe that. You need to work hard. You just need to, that's in the past. You need to think about that. No, that's not true. It's not true. You can ask the average white person. If I hand you $1 million for just, painting the house. Would you paint the house, for $1 million? And they say, yeah, I'd paint the house for $1 million. I'd paint the house for $1 million. They said, well, tell you what, we've got this, since you like money, if we had a formula that would change you to a black man, we'd give you $5 million for this experiment, but your hair would curl up and your skin would get dark and you would just be considered a black man. Would you take the $5 million? Some would, but many, if you put that shadow over them as you're going to be a black man, you're going to be treated like a subhuman, they might not take that deal because they know, or people know, how the black race has been looked at and have been oppressed and suppressed for decades, for centuries. That's changing. There's hope, but you got to stay on the right line. If you're going to commit a crime, commit a felony, you're going to go back in the cotton field, so to speak. It's going to be over for you. You don't want to go that route. That's about all I have. I'm Doc V, and I'll see you next time.